Hi everyone, this is Harlan Kilstein and I am the publisher of the Dogington Post. I'd like to welcome you all today to our fascinating training webinar about relationships between dogs and their humans. Our special guest today is Alecia Evans. She's been transforming these relationships since 2001. She's trained hundreds of dogs of all ages, breeds, and temperaments, and she's probably been training their dog parents too. She began suspecting along the way that many of the tools used to train dogs and puppies were causing undetected harm and damages to the dog's neck, to the throat, and the spinal areas. Oftentimes there were long-term ramifications of this. As a matter of fact, when I presented this to the Dogington Post team about a webinar that I wanted to do, they were incredulous. They said, but Dr. Kilstein, all those tools out there, they can't be as what you're saying. And I insisted that they talk to Alecia. And when they came back to me, they said, this is going to be a great webinar. So what you're going to learn today is not only that regular collars, choke chains, shock collars could be potentially harmful. You're going to learn today from Alecia why these tools are dangerous and show you how you can train with no pain. So what we're going to do is, we're going to greet Alecia. Hi and welcome. And
hi, Harlan. Thank you.
We're going to make you the presenter. I know you know how this is done, so I'm going to go ahead and make you the presenter.
Okay, so shall I take it away?
Take it away. I'm here listening.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody so much for joining us. Thank you, Harlan, and your team for inviting me. It's really an honor to present this information because my whole life I have loved dogs, and I will share with you an incident that happened with my dog about 20 years ago, which evolved into really basically making a promise to my dog 20 years ago. And now I'm going to present to you guys how to really walk in sync with your dog in the easiest, simple ways. And my goal is really to educate you, because so many times, even as a trainer, what happens is we're so used to seeing the outside effects. You know, we want a dog to sit, so you know we use a treat or we use a choke collar or we do some kind of pulling, and we really don't fully realize what actually takes place on the inside of the dog's body and how that can lead to a set of chain reactions. And that really is my goal today. I'm not putting anything down. I'm not making anything negative. Just sharing with you the background and the information that I have and the different things that I've discovered as a trainer, and really what led me to invent the WalkInSync system for dogs, as my goal being to end the choking of dogs in training and on walks. And that goes for puppies and dogs, because after a while I just really started to see the ramifications of it, and started connecting how the behavioral issues were actually being affected by the body. All right, so we are going to launch into the presentation. Whoop, if I can get my forward button to go forward. Hang on, there we go. So I'm sure a lot of you have had puppies, and this picture really kind of cracked me up, because at the height of their puppydom, there's just this intense raw energy, and basically it just needs to move. So, trainers generally are advocating, oh, well, exercise the dog, take them for a walk, throw a ball for them, do something that distracts them, do something that physically gets the dog tired. And one great way that we've come up with, we play fetch, and I think a lot of people are familiar with that chuck it tool. Kind of wish I had invented that one too. That was a pretty simple one, but it really illustrates the point that we as dog owners know that we need to exercise our dogs, and wanted to come up with the simplest, easiest way for us to do it. And what I kind of started finding with Fetch, and I'll get into this as we go through the presentation, it is a wonderful, wonderful way to drain your dog's energy, but most of the time it's a physical-based exercise. You know, the dog's going, he gets the ball, he comes back. The dog's going, he gets the ball, he comes back. And there's really not a lot of mind-body connection with that. And I know a lot of people on the call are probably pretty familiar in our human world of the mind-body connection in exercise. And that's when things like yoga started coming up, and Tai Chi, and stretching. So we were coordinating not just the physical movement of exercise, but we were adding in harmonizing, you know, the brain with the physical exercise, and it led to a lot more calmness. So now I'm going to show you Barney. This is actually, my Barney was really the reason of how I actually became a dog trainer. And Barney as a puppy really did not, most puppies, as you'll notice, there's a time frame, maybe between 8 weeks when we get them and about 6 months when, you know, we're raising them. They really want to please. You know, if you really look at the dog, they're just looking for leadership or direction, or they want to feel like they're doing the right thing and they're pleasing you. And I think that's where a lot of training is going today with the whole positive training movement. You know, we're working with our dogs to learn how do we harness that energy so we really create, you know, great dogs that are thinking, that are intelligent, that are not necessarily automatons, you know, sit and the dog sits in 2 seconds, but, you know, dogs that we can really have a fun time with, that are socialized and well-mannered to fit in our human world. Well, Barney really presented an extraordinarily interesting challenge because there was never a time in Barney's life from puppyhood that he ever cared whether he pleased his humans or not. And at that time, which was about 20 years ago, there wasn't a positive dog training movement, you know, so there was no click and treat, there was no, you know, food-based rewards. What there was trainers that made you feel that if you ever gave your dog a treat or like a piece of food from the table, you would actually be struck down by lightning. And it was scary because the only thing that really motivated Barney was food, but I wasn't allowed to use food or treats. So what landed up happening was it was my education in learning about all the different types of training tools. We went through choke collars and prong collars, and we went through a nose halter. Unfortunately, we went through a shock collar because I didn't know what else to do to take care of this dog and to keep him safe, because he had no remorse. He had like, hey, if I run away, I run away. I don't care that you're running behind me. He didn't care about pleasing his people. So with each different tool, I started to see the effects and the ramifications that it was actually having on my dog's body. And at the time that I was training Barney, I was a fitness trainer for humans. I was an elite level fitness trainer in New York City, and I was learning all about the human anatomy, and I was working with a chiropractor myself, and I was working with a Chinese energy master from China, learning about energy and how it flows in the body and how it can become disconnected. So Barney was actually my introduction to what do these tools do that we're using on the outside, what can they affect on the inside. And the first place that we started was, you know, a flat collar. And, you know, unfortunately, dogs don't always understand this command, and it's not in the 10 Commandments, but it should be for the dog Bible. Every one of us as a dog parent, as a trainer, as a veterinarian, none of us want our dogs to pull. You know, we want to have the ideal relationship. We want our dogs to walk right with us and be in sync with us. And really, in the beginning, this was me with Barney. And, every time I would try a tool and it didn't work, I'd go back to the trainer, and then we were taught to get a more intense type of tool that would administer a more, what I would call, negative punishable consequence. And it just never totally felt right. I just didn't know what else to do. Now, if you look at this picture, off the bat, one of the things that you can see is when you look at that golden retriever's neck, his neck is being pulled back towards the woman that's got him on the leash, but the dog is doing everything he can to keep his paws, his front paws, on the floor, and he has to pull, because when she's pulling him back, he actually feels off balance, and he feels like he would flip over backwards. So I never really understood this when I started training till I really got into looking at the biomechanics of dogs, of their muscle structure, of their bone structure, of how their body moves through space and time. And, just when I was looking through pictures to put together the presentation, I said, God, there's a thing that dog trainers call the opposition reflex. And what I never understood till the last couple of years was it should actually be called the reposition reflex. Because when a dog is pulling forward and you're pulling back on their neck, the only reason they're pulling is to balance themselves. Now, at the time I had Barney, I was in my 20s, so I took a lot of stuff personally. And I thought the dog was pulling because he didn't like me or he was being stubborn. I really didn't realize at the time it was just simply because he was trying to reposition his body, and the tools that we were using were not making sense to him or to me. So one of the things that as I went through this work and as I started really looking at the effects of the collars, so the traditional thing is anytime we have a dog, we need a collar and a leash. Like the two things that every dog owner looks for: I need food for my dog and I need a collar and a leash. Because most of us, live in suburban areas or city areas, and we don't have, like a 50, 60 acre ranch where we can train our dogs, and they don't have to be on leash. And I always thought, well, okay, at least a flat collar is the safest thing I can do for my dog. But as I started, investigating and I continued my research, what I started to realize was, my God, even with a flat collar, if that dog is consistently pulling on his neck, there's going to be neck strain, there's going to be jerking on the leash, and it can, it activates that opposition reflex. Excuse me, but what I'll show you in the next couple of slides is what's actually happening inside your dog's body anytime that there is pressure of any type, be it a flat collar, be it a choke chain going on, and allow you to have the information so you can make the highest and best choices for your animals. I can't tell you, what I think you should be doing. I just want to present to you the information so you have it, and you look at it and you decide, what you want to use with your dog. So once we got past the flat collar, the next thing that was recommended was the choke chain. And I saw this, I was looking for some way to make it funny and comical, and the cartoon says, I'm afraid the choke chain worked too well, dear, because the dog is like completely passed out. And this is what I was given when we were in puppy training and the flat collar wasn't working. We were told to use the choke chain. Now, we were told to use the choke chain with a very quick, sharp pop, and I was paying more attention to the instructor, what I was supposed to do and how I was supposed to, snap that choke chain quick, than I was to my dog. And unfortunately, I had no idea how much pressure gets put on that dog's neck when you snap it. So another website that I was on, and these are very like choke chain oriented trainers. The comment here, and this is, you've got two halves of the picture. The one half is you seeing the choke chain underneath the base of the dog's neck, and I'll explain in a few minutes exactly what is happening in this picture in terms of what's going on inside the dog's system. The picture on the right is that dog is being choked and literally its feet are being pulled off the floor. And the quote says, most aggressive dogs only need to have their front feet lifted off the ground a few times to realize that you can take their air away when you want it. This is not painful for the dog. Now, I kind of beg to differ, and I'm sort of like, okay, well, if it's not painful for the dog, let's actually put a choke chain on you and tell me how it feels. And if any of you guys have ever tried it, when a dog gets choked, not only does it affect the organs and the tissues and the muscles and the bones inside the body, but it really sends a very distressing signal through the entire nervous system of the dog that's fear-based. So this is actually training with fear. And, you know, while not a lot of people can really understand what it's like to be in the dog's position, that's usually why I recommend, you know, a human trying this and then let me know how your dog feels, because the dog's neck is probably as much, if not more sensitive than our neck. And when I broke it down completely, when we were looking at choke chains, the really simple answer was like, would you choke your child? And if you wouldn't put, you know, if you look at this and you go, like, well, why would you do that to your dog? And I'm not even talking from a scientific perspective at this moment. I'm not even talking about what's inside the throat. Any person on this call probably looks at that and goes, oh my God, I would never do that. Because we know it can hurt the child, it's painful, and it just is kind of like, really? Not civilized. So if we wouldn't do it to a kid, why would we do it to our dogs? So to relate back to those couple of pictures, I've got a picture here of what the dog's trachea looks like inside the body. And if you look at the center of the picture, the trachea is actually more stiff than normal soft tissue that is made to support the food going down the channel, and it is made to stay soft, except have a little bit of a harder structure. When we start doing things with either flat collars or choke chains or prong collars, what starts to happen is we're putting an undue amount of pressure on the trachea. Now, the unfortunate thing with the trachea is that if you damage it, okay, if you cause it ill repair, it cannot regenerate itself like muscle tissue could. What happens is, if you damage it, it basically starts to die. And when it starts to die, it gets hard. And if any of you guys are out there and you have ever gone to the pet food store and you've gotten your dog's trachea, that's what a dead trachea looks like. Now, can you imagine? That is supposed to be soft cartilage. And if you start damaging it while it's inside the dog's body, that dog now cannot swallow properly. That dog cannot necessarily, and if it can't swallow properly, if you go down the chain, it can't necessarily digest properly. So anytime we're looking at our dogs, I feel as a trainer, and this is also the work that I'm starting to bring forward, we really need to look at what am I doing on the outside that could have a potential effect on the inside. And like the Paige said before, you know, it only takes a couple of times of taking the dog's air away. For me personally, I am never willing to do that because I don't know the damage I can do. Let's say it's a 4-month-old puppy. I don't know that the damage I do at 4 months, it may not show up till the dog's 3 years old. But we tend in this society not to make those connections. In our medicine, human medicine or animal medicine, we have a very reductionist philosophy. So we separate everything out. So when I look at it from a whole perspective because of what I learned from Chinese medicine. So I'm always looking at what is the safest thing that I can do for this animal that is going to keep them safe for the rest of their life. And for me personally, I just don't even want to take a chance. And now I'm not against collars because I think that every dog absolutely should have a collar with tags on it. But I'm really starting to change my point of view about using a collar for training because it can do damage. I think you need the collar for the tags, and I'm just recognizing, and I've recognized over the past 5 or 6 years, how much safer a harness is going to be for your dog because it won't put pressure on a lot of these areas. So some of the scientific research that's coming out, we just looked at the trachea, and if you look at the picture in the middle with the cute little boxer, you'll see the trachea in the circle, but on the side of the trachea are the thyroid glands. Now, this is Dr. Jean Dodds. She is a very, very well-known, very well-researched veterinarian. Dr. Dodds started out really starting to question the effects of yearly vaccines on dogs. So she is running an entire study. I think she's been running it for the last 7 or 8 years. It could be a little bit longer on, do we need to vaccinate every year, and are vaccines, causing some of the health issues that we're seeing. The second thing that she decided to take a look at was this area and this issue with collars, because she started kind of making a connection that, wow, if you're constantly hitting on the dog's thyroid gland, you could potentially be doing damage. Now, the thyroid gland is a master gland in dogs and in humans that actually controls our immune function. So to me, when I look at it from a health perspective, okay, and then I'm going to layer it with the training perspective, I do not want to be doing anything on a daily basis that could be stimulating, could be damaging, or could be, rattling up my dog's thyroid gland. Because again, we come from a scientific model of reductionism. So if there's a thyroid issue, the doctors will look at it like, oh, it's the thyroid issue. But they don't take a look at, well, what could have potentially caused this? And as all of us pet parents and trainers and veterinarians and pet sitters know, there are certain dogs that are pullers. And that pulling on an everyday basis can have a dramatic effect on the health of our dogs. And I know that more and more science is going to continue bringing that forward. Now, another problem when we do anything around the neck, because again, most of the time we're looking at the outside of the dog, but what we don't realize is any pressure on the neck can absolutely start to affect the eyes. And if anybody wants to doubt that or test it out, just take your hand, take the side of your hand and put it on your Adam's apple and just leave it there for a couple of seconds, because not only will it start to feel like you're getting lightheaded, so you're not really going to be able to hear as well, you're actually going to start to notice that your eyes are starting to feel a pressure. So that's another thing that we don't and really haven't connected yet with what's happening when we're using anything on the dog's throat that could potentially cause a constant pressure. So this can happen with any type of collar. I mean, I know people are saying, no, the martingale is a safe collar, it's wider, it's thicker. I will agree with the fact that it's wider and thicker, so it covers a wider base of the neck rather than like what this little dachshund has on his neck. It's a much smaller area. So that's really going to kind of hit him at his Adam's apple and his trachea. However, any type of prolonged pressure, in my opinion and my experience, could potentially cause some of these issues, like so far thyroid and eye issues. And unfortunately, most of us do not make the connection. We think we're doing something at the throat, so how could that have any challenge? Well, how could that present any challenge to the dog? And again, as I said before, with the trachea, we've got to be really, really careful, because once it's injured, okay, it doesn't regrow itself. And that's the danger that we kind of run into, and especially like poodles and German shepherds are two dogs that, as they get older, there's a dis-ease called laryngeal paralysis. And when we looked at the trachea, right above the trachea is the larynx. And when I showed you that picture from Learberg with the Malinois kind of like off the ground, that choke chain was right at that dog's larynx. And if you put the larynx off of balance, when that dog gets older, there's a major potential that they will suffer from this laryngeal paralysis, because that tissue is supposed to be soft. It's supposed to have structure, but it's supposed to be soft. And once it gets hard, you can't reverse it, and the dog has to go through the issues of not really being able to swallow well. I promise you there will be good news after this. I just wanted to share with you guys, you know, what I've been seeing, what I've been finding. And again, I'm not trying to make this all negative. I'm just sharing with you the education of, you know, what will make the most sense for you, for your own animal. So I had used a prong collar on Barney because, again, once the choke chain didn't work, I didn't know what else to do, and we were recommended to use a prong collar. Now, I'm going to treat this one from two sides, because I'm going to give you the natural dog theory of basically what it's based on, but then how it was created. Now, when I put this on Barney, this is a dog who was like a tank. I mean, he would pull me anywhere. He didn't care. As soon as I put this on, the dog froze in his tracks, and he wouldn't even move. And I know that with a prong collar, you're not supposed to pull the dog on it or with it. It's just supposed to be used so that when the dog is pulling you, they'll feel a little bit of a sensation of like teeth going into their neck, kind of like what a mother dog would do. But as you can see from this picture, there could be potential damage that those prongs could actually pass through the skin. Now, I'm not saying that this happens with every dog, but if you really understand the theory, and I do believe that this was invented by a veterinarian years ago, the theory is that when a dog, a mother dog, or a leader dog is going to correct a younger dog, they're going to put their mouth on the dog's neck. Now, the thing that happens is that mouth is not around the entire neck, and it is only used for correction. The dog will only use that mouth for correction. So here you have a tool that is circulating around the dog's entire neck. You have a tool that could be used where if the dog was pulling a little bit, he's going to stay on that kind of pressure. And that kind of pressure can actually elicit a fear-based response. So now, instead of having a dog that's, you know, paying attention from positive reinforcement and understanding your leadership, now the nervous system is producing chemicals that are starting to get the dog to kind of be in fear. And in my opinion, and that's all it is, just my opinion and my experience, you don't want to train from a place of fear. You want to train from a place that gets the animal motivated and they can really feel fantastic about what they do and how they're pleasing you and that they did the right thing. So, you know, I'm not saying that prong collars don't work. I'm not a huge advocate of them just because of the fact that if you wouldn't see a dog with its mouth around another dog walking around with it, and that's how it would train it. It would put its mouth over the neck once or twice just to get the point across so that the lesser dominant dog understands, like, I meant what I said, and that would be it. So the next thing we tried with Barney was a nose halter. And the interesting thing was this dog, who normally would just pull, the dog went ballistic. I mean, he was a gorgeous chocolate lab, and all he did was literally scratch his nose bloody. And he was flailing around on the floor trying to get this thing off. Now, again, I'm not saying that this doesn't work for dogs, because there's a lot of dogs it works for, but I'll share with you now the issues that I've had with it. The first thing that I noticed with Barney, he started, you know, scratching at his nose, and then he was flailing around. 2 days later, I went to touch his neck, and he yelped and he screamed. Now, I didn't know what had happened to him, but I had been going to a chiropractor enough for myself that I started to go, oh my God, I think this dog has a couple of vertebrae out in his neck. Brought him to a dog chiropractor, and sure enough, there were 3 vertebrae out in his neck. Soon as those got realigned, the dog was fine. Tried the nose halter again, and he just wouldn't do it. Like, he just fought me on it, and I was like, okay, this is not going to work. And if it was working, I'd be okay. But because it wasn't working, I didn't want to stress out my dog any more than he had already been. So what I find with the nose halters is if you use them effectively, they can be very successful. The problem is, and you can even see the way the leash is dangling down, so it's sort of always putting a tension and a pressure on the nose. The theory behind this is that the dog's walking with you, and when the dog is walking next to you, let's say in a heel position, there shouldn't really be any tension on the nose. It's just a reminder to the dog, and basically all we're trying to do here is harness the dog's energy so he won't pull you. But you got a dog now walking around almost sort of cross-eyed, and for most of us out there, I know for myself, the majority of times I see a dog in a nose halter, they're not looking very happy. They're kind of like, oh my God, I wish I could get this thing off of me already. So nose halters can be a good tool, but I also find the people that are out there jogging with their dog, the people that are out there riding their bike with their dog, and now you've got a dog whose body is going forward, except maybe the head is cranked to the left because they're trying to stay with their human. So from a physiological and musculature standpoint, that dog's body is going to be completely thrown off balance, because if his head is turned to the left, he's going to develop an overuse injury, potentially. And especially when you're riding on a bike, I mean, your dog wants to go with you. He doesn't not want to go, but it's putting the dog in a compromised position. So I kind of let people know, listen, if you need to use it, just make sure you're always walking straight with the dog, and that nose is as soft as possible. Because this, although we're using it right now to try and harness the dog's energy, the problem is this is not really the collection point for a dog to get back into its body after it's gone into that headspace of just instinct. So then we have another potential, which is the rear clip harness. Now, by far, to me, a rear clip harness is far superior in terms of physiology and musculature than anything we've looked at. But the only problem is, look at where the pressure of this dog's body is. He's totally in his front legs, and the leash is way behind him, and there's no way that dog is actually gonna stop pulling. That's not his collection point. And I'll tell you in a couple minutes what I discovered about the collection point and why there are ways we can work with our dogs with harnesses that are much safer, much more effective, and it's so easy. So I am a huge advocate of harnesses, but as I'll show you, certain harnesses are going to work better for certain things and certain behaviors than others. This is still going to keep the dog in active instinct mode from his head, looking at anything he wants to go after or chase. This is not going to teach the dog necessarily how to back off pressure and harness his own energy. Now, as I started training, I went into dog training after I was a fitness trainer, and I just started, researching. I wanted to really understand. From years ago, the conclusion of my Barney story was we tried everything, nothing worked. I went back to the choke chain, and unfortunately, one day when Barney was dragging me down the hill, it was just that breaking point. I pulled the choke chain way too hard because it sounds crazy, but my mentality at the time was, if I hurt the dog or give him pain, maybe he will listen. Now, that's not acceptable to me anymore. I didn't know any better at the time. But I heard my dog yelp, and he winced in pain, and I dropped to my knees, and I was in hysterics because I felt like a complete failure. Here I am. I have this dog that I love. I want to have a great relationship. But everything I'm doing now is hurting my dog. And years later, when I found some products that were front clip harnesses, I also came upon this study that was done in Sweden by a behaviorist named Anders Hallgren, and he went to a dog kennel club. He took a random study of the dogs at the kennel club. There were 400 dogs in the study, and basically he had his friends who were chiropractors evaluating the dogs. And what they found was, out of 400 dogs, 63% of those dogs had neck and spine issues. Now, the people didn't know because they didn't even know that the dog's neck was subluxated or they had bones out of alignment or ribs out of place. But 63% out of 400 dogs is quite a large number to have enough evidentiary proof that we could be doing damage to our animals, through the tools we're using. Out of those 63% of the dogs that had neck and spine injuries, 78% of those dogs exhibited aggressive or hyperactive activity. Now, as a dog trainer, I find that extraordinarily important because while most of the time as a trainer we'll look at the dog, we'll use a treat, we'll use a clicker to try and redirect the behavior, if we are not looking at what got compromised in the dog's neck and spine, which is where the entire central nervous system is housed, because the nerves for the entire body come out through all of those holes in the spine. So if anything happens at the top of the neck or anywhere through the neck, you can have repercussions down your dog's back and you can have behavioral issues. And while you can help modify the behavior in certain ways, you're still now dealing with a dog that's got interference in its central nervous system. And because I do body work and because of the Chinese medicine I studied, I also started checking backs. And especially with my aggression cases and my submission cases and my over exuberant golden retrievers who couldn't hold themselves still, what started to happen was I learned a very simple muscle release technique that when you release the muscle that's connected to the spine bone or connected to a rib, it actually relaxes the rib or those bones and it just lets it move back into place. So what I started finding was, oh my God, even before I would start training the dog, I would just evaluate the back and just do muscle release, and about 85% of the dog's behavior would go away. And what fascinated me was they don't teach this anywhere in training. They don't teach how connected behaviors are with bodies. And in my opinion, and from my experience, you can't have a behavior without a body. So if you're going to address the behavior, but you haven't started with the body, then you're asking the dog to override a lot of stuff instead of helping clear the dog's nervous system. Now, just going back to this study, out of those 78% of dogs with aggression and hyperactivity, 91% of those dogs strained against the leash. So that means that 91% of these animals were putting pressure on their neck and throat. And when I look at this, again, I don't look at things from a reductionistic perspective. I actually look at things from a holistic and comprehensive perspective. I want to know what the root issue is that's affecting the entire system. Because if I can go to the root, I can help the entire system get back into harmony and flow easier. And as a trainer, really, that's actually my job. My job is when people come to me with dogs that are out of balance behaviorally, I need to help them. And one of the ways I found helping them is, number one, providing them with the right tools, but number two, making sure their dogs' bodies are clear of interference. And as I mentioned before, we don't know, if you guys have had puppies, you know that you put a collar on a puppy and they kind of start scratching, but then you put the leash on and the first thing the puppy wants to do is back up and see if he can wriggle his head out of it. So even at that point, we don't know yet the damage that we could be doing, and it might not show up till the dog is 6, 7, 8 years old. That a subluxation in a neck vertebrae could actually land up causing rear end paralysis later on down the line. And that's also too why I appreciate so much the complementary modalities of acupuncture and massage, you know, and body work, because if we do these things with our animals on, you know, even twice a year, we are keeping their health in balance so much to such a greater degree. So even the cost that we pay for that, in the end of not having to have a dog that's going to deteriorate body-wise, it's a lot safer. And now, you know, we're going to take a look at, we're going to take a look at the front clip dilemma. I was introduced to front clip harnesses in about 2008. And the oddest thing was I was training one of my clients' dogs who happened to be a female chocolate lab, who happened to pull me into the pet store. And I said, oh my God, you know, I've got to do something with this dog. And my friend who owned the pet store said, hey, listen, you know, we just got in these front clip harnesses. You got to try it. Within 30 seconds of putting this on the dog and holding the leash with a solid boundary, the dog totally stopped pulling. And I loved it. I was completely sold on it. I was like, oh my God, the dogs universally get that there's a collection point at the front of their chest. It's not at their throat. It's not behind them. It's right at the center of the chest at the breastbone. And if you hold a clear and proper boundary with the dog will all of a sudden get back into its body, get out of instinct, and start understanding how to harness his own energy. So the problem with this that I started to notice after a little while was I was so enamored by how well it works. But if you look at this picture, you will see that this strap goes straight across the dog's chest, and it sits right at the top of the dog's shoulder joint. So it's actually, from the front view, it is actually sitting on a place on the shoulder joint where the dog now is limited in his range of motion. This type of harness, which is, you know, it's very popular. I mean, there's the Sensation harness, there's the Easy Walk harness, and there's the Freedom harness. And they're all good products and well-meaning products. But my background is biomechanics. So I have to look and say, hey, great, I love the theory, but is there anything here that is actually compromising the dog's ability to move? Because if we're compromising the dog's ability to move, even though we're using it to stop the dog from pulling, we are going to see issues further down the line. Okay, so when the dog on the right goes to lift his leg, you know, let's say he was running, he cannot lift his leg to full stride, which will not allow his shoulder to fully stretch out, and you can actually have an earlier onset of arthritis because you're limiting the range of motion. The other thing with this is that a lot of dogs that are very narrow or a lot of dogs that are very wide in the chest, this is not the best product for, simply because there's too much room, and then what happens is it actually starts chafing the front of the dog's shoulder. The other part of it is, if you can see from the smaller inset picture on the left, there's a little black clip on the gray part. Well, the way these products are designed, it basically sits right underneath the dog's armpit. So as a trainer, it's kind of embarrassing when you tell your clients to go get this, and then they say, hey, it kind of worked, but I just had to spend $125 at the vet because it totally made my dog raw under the armpit, and they won't use it at all. So this was kind of like the dilemma that I ran into, because I loved the front clip harnesses. I loved getting that the collection point for the dog is right at the chest, but biomechanically I was like, this is not, we still have improvements to make. And this is when I started, I meditate, not embarrassed by it, actually love it, keeps my brain sane. But I literally would ask in meditation to be shown a product that I wanted to use for the dogs, that I wanted to train with. You know, I never ever expected to develop anything. I just wanted a tool that I could use that I knew that was biomechanically safe for the dog. It would give totally, you know, open range of motion to the shoulders. It would allow the dog to learn a lot faster. And that is when, after a couple months of asking, the literal picture for the WalkInSync harness kind of came into my mind. And the way I saw it was, if you've ever seen a horse that pulls a cart, the harness is like a teardrop shape. that goes around the base of the neck, not at the neck. And as soon as I saw it, I thought, oh my God, that's it. That's what I want. But it wasn't on the market. So lo and behold, a series of things happened, and little by little, people would keep showing up in my life. You know, somebody said, oh, I can sew this, and okay, you need industrial work done. Go to that person. And I loved the harness, but I was like, all right, listen, as a dog trainer, I can work with the dogs in 10 minutes and have certain results because it's what I do, it's what I'm focused on, it's what I'm good at. I know how to read the dog well, and I also know my behaviors and how they're going to resonate with the dog. But I thought, you know, it's got to be something that's really, really easy for the humans, because a lot of the times, if the human's not going for a trainer, or they're starting to get frustrated and they just don't understand why it's not working, which was really the same issue I had, you know, back with Barney. And it's kind of funny that they say necessity is the mother of invention, because it really, really is. So I knew that I had to find a way to help the human be consistent, because in my work and in my training, my number one priority and my number one secret that I teach all of my clients, be consistent. If you're consistent, you're going to have a consistent dog. Now, if you're consistent in letting your dog pull you, your dog is going to consistently pull you. If you're consistent in bringing the dog back in and then letting him out, so the dog's boundaries are constantly changing, you're going to have a dog that constantly tests your boundaries. So I thought, well, what can I do to make it easy? And at the time, I had started making a knot in my leash just so that I had a stopping point that was always consistent for the dog. But I realized, you know, there's got to be an easier way. And then I decided I wanted to couple a leash with the harness, because if I can put the right flat handles on the leash, I can get the human to be totally consistent. And if the human is totally consistent with the boundary, then the dog's going to be totally consistent with learning to walk in sync with the human in just a few minutes. What I did not expect out of all of this was this is actually how I discovered where the dog's natural collection point is, which is right at the chest. And it takes them out of instinct, because like the Doberman that I showed you before that was on the harness and all stretched out, that dog is now in a pointing position. Everything in the physiology and biochemistry of that dog is saying, I am going forward, you know, and until you can find a way to hit the right pressure point, I'm going to still go forward. But what I learned with WalkInSync was, well, wait a minute. If I have a consistent boundary and the dog's getting the pressure right at the proper place and the human just stands there and kind of relaxes and doesn't do anything, what will start to happen is the dog starts to question in their mind, how come we're not going forward? And all of a sudden, now I've got a dog that was on instinct, that wasn't even paying attention to the human. Their brain's starting to refunction. And as their brain is starting to refunction, they're coming back into being the intelligent being they are, which makes them recognize they have to figure it out. They have to change something. And the interesting part that I found was when the dog makes the choice to back up, when the dog makes the choice because the human is not going forward and the dog only has a certain amount of room, that dog's brain chemistry actually changes. So rather than having to pull on the dog's neck, rather than having to feed the dog a bunch of treats, rather than having to do anything that would correct the dog, you're simply holding a very clear boundary because you're relaxed and you're just saying to the dog, hey, if you pull, I'm not moving forward. When that dog chooses to back up, now you have made a huge difference in that dog's brain, because now the dog goes, oh my God, I get it. If I'm on pressure, my human will not go and I have to back up. Once that happens, if you follow the same 3 easy steps that I designed with the system, all of a sudden the dog is so light on pressure because they've realized what's happening. A lot of the times, you know, if we go to pull on a choke chain or pop a leash or even pop a harness, the dog's not exactly sure why we did it. They just know we interrupted them in doing something. But what I found with this design was, oh my God, these dogs are really becoming intelligent. And it was interesting to me because I would have clients that would call and say, you know what, this is the strangest thing ever. But when I put that harness on my dog, it's like my dog just knows their boundary. And it's just so easy to work with them. So really what I was looking for was a front clip harness that was a safer design for the dog. So we started doing this series of 5-minute manner makeovers where I wanted to see, you know, how fast can this thing really work? Because if I'm going to put out a claim that it can work pretty fast, it better do it or I'm going to look pretty silly. So one of the 5-minute makeovers that we did was with 7-year-old Lexi, who's the little girl, and her 13-week-old Mastiff, who is now 100 pounds. She was probably about 45 pounds and probably weighed more than her little girl at the time. And these next set of pictures is what's actually happening of what Rosie would do to Lexi. She was jumping all over her. She was grabbing the leash. She was trying to take control of the situation because in dog mind, your dog knows one of two things. Either you're in charge and the leader, and if you're not going to be the leader in how your dog understands leadership, your dog's going to take over leadership. So that's exactly what was happening with Lexi and Rosie. Rosie was like, hey, I don't really see you as my leader. I see you as my playmate. And this happens often, especially when we're training puppies. So what we did was we just put the WalkInSync on Rosie. I showed Lexi the 3 easy steps. You just, you walk, and if your dog starts pulling, you just stop and relax. And you wait till she backs up, and then you pat her. And literally within 4.5 minutes, Lexi and Rosie were totally walking together without no exercise. I did not go out and exercise Rosie. We didn't change anything. We just put the different system on her. And I made sure to remind Lexi, if she's pulling, just stop. And there's these two walking in sync with each other at 4.5 minutes. And mind you, Lexi's she's a 7-year-old girl, and at 13 weeks, even though Rosie is as big as she is, she's still a total puppy. And these two just kind of walked off and were in a balanced relationship. And Lexi was able to be the leader without ever having to dominate Rosie, without ever having to use a treat, and also without ever having to pull on her neck. And it just started to dawn on me that, wow, when you combine the harness and the leash together, the humans actually get into the energy of authentic leadership, not dominance leadership, but just authentic, like I say what I mean and I mean what I say, and I'm consistent. And any dog that I have ever worked with, those are the 2 main things they're looking for in giving you leadership. Are you consistent? And do you say what you mean, and do you back it up by meaning what you say? So what happened kind of with WalkInSync was I just really started to realize, like Bill Gates had a vision, and his vision was a computer on every desk. And I was looking at this system, and I had no intention whatsoever of becoming a pet product manufacturer. I'm a trainer. I love training. I love working with dogs and humans. I had no desire to manufacture or produce anything. And what I started seeing as I was using WalkInSync, I kind of thought in the beginning, I was like, all right, maybe it's a fluke, just maybe it's a fluke. And when I knew that my real proving of whether this kind of, where the placement was for everything, would it really work, is if I sent it out to people and I wasn't there to train them, they knew nothing about me, they knew nothing about the equipment except what they saw on the website, could they do it? And we started getting back more and more and more feedback, like, this is unbelievable. I can finally walk my dog. I can, I can't even believe that this is the same dog. We have such a better relationship. And I thought, wow, I know I never had an intention of becoming a pet product manufacturer, but I started seeing the results of it, and so it started making me realize there is a universal language that the dogs have. And what I also started to realize, like, if I bring this back to when we were looking at the typical way to exercise your dog is by playing fetch. And that's a very physical exercise, but it really doesn't do anything to make a mind-body connection with the dog. because the way dogs are in a dog pack, each dog will teach the other one what the boundaries are. When they're taught what the boundaries are, they really get more focused. And when they get more focused, it's because dogs function in a survival mode as a pack. You know, you can't be an off-balance pack member, or you actually threaten the existence and the sustaining of the pack itself. So when I started using WalkInSync, I thought, oh my God, what's happening here is that we are exercising the dog's body, because we can go for walks, we can go for runs, we can go on bike rides, but because of the boundary, we're actually also exercising the dog's mind. Because as you start using it, what starts to happen is, if you're working with it, the dog understands to back up, then you start walking slower. Now all of a sudden, the dog starts walking slower. And what I found was the beauty of that was when a dog changes their own mind and they actually make the choice, they're going to make the choice for good. So it was mind-blowing to me how many dogs were changing so fast because of the combination of these two factors, and how much easier it was on the human to just be in an authentic leadership position. Because as any of you on the call know, once you get yanked and pulled by a dog, or once you experience leash burn through the palm of your hand, you start to get nervous and anxious. So what I started noticing, because all the people that were testing this out for me, their dogs had pulled them down, their dogs had issues with pulling, I just started to notice, my God, with this, as soon as the dog pulls and the human realizes the dog can pull, but they're not getting pulled down, the human's entire energy field changed to, I guess I really am the leader. And the dog would go, I can respect that. And that's when the dog started listening more. So it really is improving our communication as well. So as a holistic dog trainer, I look at all areas. I look at the behavior, I look at their health, I look at their bodies, and I also look at the emotional factors between the humans and the animals. And one of the things I started to find was, especially when you got aggressive dogs, you generally have either a fearful or an aggressive human. So I had to find a way to diffuse that stuff, because literally, as Warren Eckstein said, it's like what goes on one end of the leash is going to go on the other, which I also think Professor Patricia McConnell said as well. And it really is true, because even though we're human and they're dog, we're still energy systems interacting with each other. And it's kind of like how a dog knows whether a human that's walking down the street is safe or they want to growl at them. They can pick up the energy of the being. So when we're walking our dog, if there's something in us that is fear-based or aggressive, our dogs are going to pick that up. And in most cases, the dog will either get fearful, okay, something's happening, but I don't know what it is, or they'll go into protective mode and go, okay, my human's fearful, I got to do something. So what I started finding here was it was a great way to calm the human, which was a fabulous way to calm the dog. So aside from being a holistic trainer, you know, and looking at all those modalities, I also wanted a front clip harness because I loved the way it worked, but I wanted something that would never inhibit shoulder motion. And if you can see from the white dog here, she's got a totally open shoulder. She can run, she can play. I have had her since she is a 10-week-old puppy, and her body is amazing. And the interesting thing is, if I ever have to shift to a collar because I didn't bring the harness out, she really is super sensitive at her throat. Like, she'll just leaning into the collar, she starts to choke because she hasn't built up those muscles. Typically, the way dogs, like if you have a pit bull or you have a lab or you have a Rottweiler, they will start to build muscle around that delicate area of the trachea to actually protect it. And so since Ayana's been on this, since she was a baby, she doesn't have that muscular protection at her throat. But I can tell you that every time I check her back, the fascinating thing is, for over 3 years, I've hardly had to do any work on her back because there's been no misalignments. So one of the things I really wanted with WalkInSync was just to really raise the bar. That, like I said before, I'm totally open to collars as long as we're not using them on our dog's throat. I think every dog should have a collar because they need tags. But really, when you look at the science of it, it does not make sense to choke a dog to train them. I know we've been doing this for years. I myself, it's what I was told by the trainers, but I've really found that it's just simply not the safest way. And it's definitely, a safer way to exercise and train and walk your dog, because you're not putting any pressure on the neck, throat, spine. And you can see, the base of where that sits, where the leash is attached to the harness, it's sitting right at her chest. So the other thing, too, is it's great for small dogs also. A lot of times people say, well, I have a small dog, it's not a big deal. Well, a small dog has a trachea and a larynx and, thyroid glands and, cervical vertebrae and thoracic vertebrae and lumbar vertebrae as well. So I really like the little dogs in it. And the interesting thing with the little dogs, if you see little dogs, a lot of the times they're yappy. They're feeling like they need to be in charge. And they're doing it because they're afraid. And what I found so beautiful with WalkInSync is that when the human starts even their smaller dog on a system that allows the human to be the leader, those smaller dogs become phenomenal dogs. Because instead of being yappy and everything, they recognize, like, they're safe, they've got their boundaries, and they're much, much happier overall. Because a lot of these dogs that are sitting there and just barking, they're actually stressed out. And I know that's odd. I don't think we really think about that with our dogs in terms of them being stressed out, but it is actually a stress response because they don't feel safe. They don't feel safe in their own bodies. And this is a great way to help the dogs be in their own bodies and help them learn to harness their energy so that you can really be focusing on the commands rather than constantly having to pull the dog back because they're walking on leash. So what I did with the harness is I combined it with our AccuGrip leash. So it's got two handles on it. They're foam rubber handles that are just super comfortable to, to hold on to. And I teach people, keep your hands at your sides. Because that, as a physical human trainer, that's the safest, most relaxed position you can be in when your hands are at your side. So what the leash does, in a conjunction with the harness, it combines clear, consistent boundaries. There will never be any leash burn. It gives you, as the human, instantaneous confidence because, like I said before, the minute your dog pulls and you realize, oh my God, I got this. Like, my dog can't run away. They can't do anything. Immediately, your confidence soars. And there's no more shoulder strain. It was interesting. I was talking to a physical therapist friend, and he said, do you know what the third top reason why people come to physical therapy for? And I thought, like, I don't know, like ACL, skiing, and they injured the back of their knee. He said, no, it's dog pulling, and it strains their ligaments and their tendons in their shoulder. And I was shocked because, you don't really hear people talking about it, but I had no idea it was the third most prevalent reason why people go to physical therapy. And the other thing, too, is when you have the harness and the leash together and you have really clear boundaries, the communication improves so quickly because instead of, trying to figure out what each other is doing, you're actually both starting to tune into each other, listening to and hearing each other, and it really starts you on that path of walking in sync together pretty quickly. So there's a couple of veterinarians that I've been following that have been doing much more extensive research on what could potentially be happening with the collars. And Dr. Karen Becker, who writes for Mercola.com, she's an excellent holistic veterinarian, she started to realize that collars can actually contribute to causing seizures because if they cause pressure at C1 and C2, too much pressure in the cerebral spinal fluid at C1, or if you knock it out of balance, can cause swelling and thus cause a seizure. So when I come across clients of mine that have seizure dogs, the first thing we do, I send them to the dog chiropractor because I want to make sure that there's no pressure in that area that we haven't recognized. And that was actually what happened to Barney when I was using the nose halter. He knocked out C1, C2, and C4. And had it gone on longer, I don't know, I can suspect, I can't say factual, but I suspect it really would have caused a lot of biomechanical issues for that dog if I didn't know. And interestingly enough, the dog clients that I do send to the chiropractor, the seizures generally tend to stop. I would say a good 85 to 90%. It's more because the bones are out of balance rather than it being a biochemical reaction in and of itself. It is a biochemical reaction, but it is a biochemical reaction because the bones are out of place, which puts a whole another level of stress on the central nervous system. And then you will see, if you take a blood test, as most vets will do, the biochemistry is off, but it's not solely because of the biochemistry. It's because the way that everything is functioning through the body is not happening according to how it normally does. Another veterinarian that I've been following is Dr. Peter Tobias, and Peter has begun realizing that collars in certain cases of his dog clients are causing cancer. You play with that thyroid gland enough, and you knock down the immune system enough, it is very, you just have a much more likely chance that the dog's immune system is not up as much, and you could, have a likelier chance of cancer being caused because of the pressure on the neck. And we also talked about Dr. Jean Dodds, who's, realizing and doing the studies on it, that collars can actually cause thyroid damage and lower your dog's immune system. So each of these veterinarians actually recommends harnesses to walk and train your dog, not just from a training perspective, but literally from a health perspective. So for me, it was really important. I wondered what it would be like. Like, my God, what if we started out these dogs and these puppies on the right paw, with tools that don't hurt them, freedom of motion. And it's interesting because I have a couple of breeders now that are only recommending WalkInSync for their entire litter. They're getting all their people on it. And I just think it's really cool because I know now that these are animals that are going to grow up without neck and throat and spine issues. And I'm interested to see, as these puppies grow, how much more that contributes to a healthy immune system and just a healthy body overall. Because that's my main goal. Even though I'm looking at behaviors, I want to make sure these dogs are as magnificent as they can be in every area. So just some things that our customers are saying, and I probably get about 5 to 6 testimonials a week of people, trying it and having totally out of control dogs on the leash and go, I can't even believe how fast this works. And I happen to know Jenny. She's one of my clients. I was working on her dog Yogi. He was a rescue, and we had to do a little bit of body work with him because he was just he's a little Chihuahua, and he was so just out of his skin almost. So we brought him back in and we put him on WalkInSync, and I let her I told her what to do, and she just said, this is unbelievable, because it was the first time that Yogi was calm, he wasn't freaking out, and he could walk with her. And as you can see from the other client testimonials, it changes the walk so fast. And in my opinion, the walk is the first place where you are really going to make the bond and the connection and establish your leadership with your dog, because that's what dogs do with other dogs. The walk is all about a leader and a follower. And if you can establish the right kind of leadership and the right energy of leadership with your dog, you are going to have so many fewer problems. And people often say, well, can you teach an old dog new tricks? And where I live out near Aspen, we have a dog sledding operation. And a lot of the times when the dogs get retired, they come to the Aspen Animal Shelter, and then they get adopted out. So one of my clients had a 13-year-old pulling sled dog, and in 3 minutes, the dog got it and never pulled. And at 13 years old, this dog was still pulling her 9-year-old son around. We got him on the WalkInSync, and it was unbelievable. And you can actually see that transformation on the WalkInSync website. And Suzanne Hotmans, she does therapeutic pets. So we're using these for a lot of the service dogs, because the service dogs, while they're very conscious about training service dogs more than any other dog have to really pay attention to their boundaries, and they can't lunge and they can't jump. And this is just phenomenal for them because they train their puppies so quickly, and then the dogs kind of always stay calm. And we've also got some veterinarian testimonials. I've been very pleased because there's a lot of veterinarians out there that, you know, I even went to my veterinarian with my Basset Hound, and I said, well, what do you think about this? And he said, well, I don't know. I'm not a dog trainer. And I said, okay, but didn't you take like 12 years of school, and don't you know anatomy and physiology better than I do? So it's just interesting. You know, there are some really wonderful holistic vets out there that really get the connections now that are being made. And my goal also is to be able to educate a lot of the veterinarians as a trainer, you know, coming from a different perspective. We're not talking the medical perspective, but just coming from a training perspective. Help educate them about why they kind of want to recommend harnesses to their puppies, you know, and to their dogs, post-op, pre-op, you know, anything having to do with the neck and the spine, because it's just safer for the dog. Anything that you, if you are interested in this product, or you like it, or you want to find out more, go on to dogingtonpost.com/harness, and that's where I would order your harness from for tonight if you'd like to order one. So, you know, here are just some top trainers in the field. Dr. Sophia Yin is a very, very well-known veterinary behaviorist. She got very much into, you know, veterinary school, went through it, and she is now recommending the system, as is Paul Owens and Barbara Johnson. So really, when I look at it in terms of taking care of your dog, the first thing you want is safety first. There's really no need to ever choke a dog to train them again, realistically, and I've just given you all the reasons physiologically and common sense-wise. It just doesn't make sense to choke our dogs. Second thing is you want to establish really clear communication. So this is a way for tools that actually help. And the third thing is that, again, you want to engage the focus of the mind and the body together. So if you'd like to partake in the system, we offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. It's available in 4 colors, and we've got 6 different sizes to accommodate dogs from 4 pounds all the way up to 155 pounds. When you order, it comes with a link to our 3 Easy Step and our Advanced 3 Easy Step, as well as our basic puppy training videos. And all of that will come to you in a link as you order it. And as a special bonus for anyone that is ordering tonight through Wednesday, we are offering a special bonus of a free copy, a free signed copy of my book, The Instinct Dog Training Method, which really gives you, when I train from the perspective of how do the dogs and the humans truly communicate. So it really is, as Harlan said at the beginning, it's relationship based. It's not about us commanding our dogs. It's about us truly being in relationship with our dogs, and especially from our dog's perspective. Because when we can learn to train with them and they get it, that we get it, that we really understand their language, it makes training painless, it makes training totally humane, and it also makes training a lot more fun and a lot more effective for the short term and the long term. So I want to thank you guys for participating, and can open the floor to any questions. And back to Harlan.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? I see Beth has a question, and she'd like to know, do you have a training video on muscle release or how to do it?
You know, Beth, that is the next thing I'm developing, because I really realize that, you know, we're not being invasive. We're not practicing medicine, but all we're simply doing is taking the muscle and learning how to just release it off the spine. That is coming. This has been a bigger project and undertaking, so that is in the works, and I am going to be offering very soon. I will be offering a weekend. It's a 2-weekend intensive, and it's a humane trainer certification. So I go really, really in depth about the dog's bodies, and you learn how to do the muscle release technique. And I will have a video, but it's going to be a little while for that.
Hi, Cecilia would like to know where she can purchase this harness and leash in New Zealand. And to do that, you
Mhm.
go to dogingtonpost.com/harness, and you'll get it. Remember, it's going to take a while because it needs to be shipped overseas,
Right.
but it will find its way to you, and it will be worth the wait.
Yes.
dogingtonpost.com/harness. I'm going to put the link into the chat box to make it clickable.
And we do, Harlan, we have a lot of customers. I mean, I'm always surprised. I'm like, how do these people in Australia and New Zealand find us? You know, and I'm amazed because I have a trainer actually in Australia now, and she's placing monthly orders with me because they sell out so fast to her customers and her clients.
Okay, well, everybody has learned a tremendous amount. Thanks you so much for Alecia. We will make this available, folks. This was like all meat, no fat. That's the kind of food that your dog kind of likes. No grains, no GMOs here, just organic information. And folks, please share this with your friends. It'll be posted in a couple of days for everybody because getting your dogs and humans in sync is what we're all about. Thanks, Alecia.
Thank you, Harlan.
Us, and we wish you all a good night. Take care, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.